This is a discussion about leadership as a lever for school improvement and investing in development for leaders. So over the course of the next hour, we are going to spend our time doing a few things. We're going to do some quick introductions, who we are. We are going to talk about Pivot's work, the work we do and why we do this work. We'll hear some reflections from some district leaders who are some key partners of ours in this work. We'll talk about a couple of things to consider, and we will leave some good space for any Q&A at the end to make sure we get to those questions. So let's jump in with those introductions. My name is Amy Galloway. I am the Executive Director of Pivot. And as I mentioned, just thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm really excited for this conversation. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Pivot in just a couple of seconds, but I want to share with you a little bit about myself first. So I spent several years as a teacher, both special ed and gen ed, across kindergarten through 8th grade before moving into school leadership, where I was an assistant principal and then spent 7 years as a principal. My last 5 years as a principal were a really formative experience for me. They were leading a school that was historically a low-performing school. It was in the bottom 5% of schools across the state. And within 4 years, thanks to a lot of really hard work by an incredible team, we were able to move that school from the bottom 5% to the top 5%. But that school, as I mentioned, it's just a very important professional experience for me, really solidifying the important work that principals do and the knowledge, skills, and mindsets that they need to be able to be effective in driving school improvements. So from there, I transitioned to the Tennessee Department of Education, where I oversaw all of the role-specific work streams that supported assistant principals, principal supervisors, and aspiring leaders. So I was there for about 3 years before co-founding Pivot, and just love this work. And so with that, I'm going to introduce two of our wonderful district partners. So on this call, we have both Dr. Dexter Murphy and Dr. Casey Jackson. And Dr. Dexter Murphy, I'm going to ask you to do an introduction first.
Yeah, sure. Hello, guys. My name is Dr. Dexter Murphy, and I serve as the Regional Director of Region 5 here in Knox County Schools. I support 13 of our city center schools here in Knox County. I started my educational career, I guess, 16 years ago as a classroom teacher. I taught for 4 years there, and then was elevated up to instructional leadership as an assistant principal. Did principalship for 8 years, I believe, if I'm counting correctly. And then from there, I worked with an educational consultant firm for a year, and then was brought back to the district to serve in this role. And I've been in this role as a regional director for 3 years. I happily support my principals here, leading school turnaround work, and also in tandem with you guys as well. So thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dexter. Dr. Casey Jackson, will you tell us a little bit about you?
Hello, everyone. I am Casey Jackson. I currently serve as the Executive Director of Academics, Haywood County Schools. And so I have been a classroom teacher as well as a district administrator for a little over 16 years. Here in Haywood, as the Executive Director of Academics, I work to support all things in academics, and that's from EAs to teachers to administrators across the district and within schools. And I work to lead an academic team of directors, and we support all disciplines. So a lot of our academic work comes through my department. And within that, part of the work that we do is to grow and develop leaders. And that's when we first started this partnership with Pivot. And we are continuing to do that work as well.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Really excited to get to hear from both of you, specifically your perspectives and experience on building capacity for principals and other leaders kind of across the vertical spine, as you both are working to do this both with your own internal systems as well as in partnership with the work that we do. So we're excited to get to hear your perspective today, and just thank you so much for being here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and learn a little bit about the work that Pivot does, just as a kind of point of reference for this conversation. So, our mission is to equip and empower the most effective school leaders who drive results for every learner in our highest need schools. And this mission is really about leadership as a strategy for school improvement, right? So I think so often there's work in coaching leaders, which is important and valuable work. But the work we're really trying to do is build skills, knowledge, and mindsets that explicitly lead to improved outcomes for students, right? And when we think about the work of principals and other leaders across that vertical spine, right? Assistant principals, principals, supervisors. When we think about that work, it's such a diverse set of skills and knowledge that leaders need, right? They have their people leadership skill sets, they need their instructional leadership skill sets, their operational leadership skill sets. And then there are these kind of like big overarching like competencies like systems thinking that are going to show up everywhere, or strategic planning that are going to show up everywhere. But all of this is really technical knowledge and skills that leaders and specifically principals need to improve outcomes for students. So the work that we do is it's way beyond kind of thinking about principal coaching and much more about building capacity kind of in alignment with what schools need to improve outcomes for students. A little bit about why we do this work. So the first thing is that principals directly impact student learning. This is a high-level summary of research that came out about 4 years ago at this point. That was a significant, meta-analysis of 25 years of research that really, for the first time, drew this direct line from principal performance to student achievement. And it wasn't just about the indirect route from principals through teachers to students. This was a direct line, right? So a principal replacing a below average principal, think about a principal who's performing in the 25th percentile, with an above average principal, think about a principal who's performing in the 75th percentile, results in learning that is equivalent to about 2.9 additional months in math and 2.7 additional months of learning in reading in the standard 9-month school year. It's like roughly 3 months in both reading and math. So an above average principal is going to lead results for student learning in their school that are significantly ahead of a below average principal. So when we look at this, we have to ask the question of like, okay, how do we move principal skill sets? Like, how do we move people from performing at the bottom or at the 25th percentile to performing at the 75th percentile? Recognizing that people who are leading schools are like dedicated, they have their minds and hearts in the right place. Often they have really strong foundational skill sets from which to draw. And they have the capacity to do the work, but the systems don't always support the level of preparation, whether it's their leader prep program or in-role support that might be needed to really effectively build their skills. The second reason here is principals impact teacher retention. So teachers regularly name principal support as one of the most important reasons in their decisions to stay or leave. And I think we all know this to be true kind of across industries, right? Not just in education, that people, that saying where like people leave their boss, they don't leave their job. That shows up as true in education research. And then recently, this analysis was done of 6 large urban districts, and it showed that in a high needs school, and high needs was defined as the percent of students who qualified as economically disadvantaged. When a principal left that school, 44% of teachers also left. And then there was additional transition that following year too. So if you think about the significant downstream impact of principal turnover, it is very real. And then this next one is just the reality that being a principal is a really hard job. I already mentioned kind of that diverse range of skill sets that leaders need to be effective. And I'm going to show here just a couple of headlines, right, that reinforce this idea. Do principals have an impossible job? Is the principal the most misunderstood person in all of education? Being a principal is one of the most complex jobs there is. And then this is one of my favorites, which is just a blog post that kind of lists out all of the hours between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. and all of the like multitude of things that this principal did across the day and how varied they are, right? How you can walk from a coaching session with a teacher to sort of a school-wide like discipline situation, to maybe a student or a family that needs you. So just this idea that you're constantly going and you need to switch from one gear to the next really quickly. And you have to have incredible discipline around how you manage your time and manage your calendar, because otherwise your time and your calendar really gets managed by the responsive or like reactive work that the role demands of you, right? If you don't have a discipline. So this is just a really hard job. And then the last kind of piece of research here that I want to surface comes from a report about 2 years ago, which says, give principals the same kind of policy attention as teachers, researchers, philanthropies, professional associations of school principals, and the Federal Department of Education should seek to understand how the school leader job is changing. These individuals and organizations should also develop policies to attract and retain high quality principals. Both state specific and national work is needed. Recognizing the unique context we're in right now with the Federal Department of Education, of course, that aside for one moment, I think this report really highlighted that on the policy side, principals have kind of been this role that's maybe a little bit behind, and like we've really focused so much on teachers, and that is so needed and so important. And also we've got to be thinking about policies for effective leader preparation, effective leader support, and the importance of keeping principals and effective principals in their role. We know that leader turnover is a real challenge, and when people feel supported and like they're growing and like they can find success in their role, they are much more likely to stay. So all of this really illuminates, why Pivot does this work in the first place. So with that, we want to hear some reflections from two of our key district partners who you met during our introductions just a couple of minutes ago. So Dr. Murphy and Dr. Jackson, we are going to ask for your thoughts on this work. And the first question that we have for you is, why have you chosen leadership capacity building as an investment in your districts and kind of in your scope of work? Like, why is this one of your strategies? And Dr. Murphy, I'll go to you first, and then Dr. Jackson will hear from you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, within our work here in Region 5, we believe that, like you were saying earlier, that investing in leadership capacity building is key because our principal effectiveness is directly linked to student achievement, right? And also sustainable school improvement. Like we always say, and you guys say, the principal is that key lever. So within Region 5 here in KCS, we have a 5-year strategic plan, and we're finishing year 2 of our implementation of our plan. But in KCS, we label this year as the year of the principal, where we really focused on making complex simple for our principals. And also we honed in on how leadership capacity directly impacts our strategic plan success, right? And also principal capacity and ownership, I believe, are key for successfully implementing, our Region 5 strategic plan and also our district goals as well. When we think about our district goals of excellence in foundational skills, great educators in every classroom, career empowerment and preparation, and success for every student. Also want to add that we think about leadership development through systematic coaching that you guys provide with our principals through Pivot, focused observations, walkthrough cycles, and actionable feedback. It not only helps our school leaders effectively execute their strategic plan initiatives, but also builds sustainability into our school improvement efforts. So, my belief is that high quality coaching that you guys are providing, as well as myself to our principals, it also increases our equity and access for our teachers, our instructional coaches, our principals, and ultimately our students, right? So leadership capacity building promotes equity by making sure that our leaders are effectively supporting our strong teaching and learning in our schools within our diverse populations.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Dr. Jackson, how about you?
Yeah, so here in Haywood County, it's important for us to grow and cultivate the talent that we have, right? So Haywood County, We're a county in West Tennessee, and we're working to, as a whole, improve student outcomes. And in my first year here, from working with the principals, because we do have monthly professional learning sessions for our principals with our leadership development week. But one of them said, a lot is put into getting the seat, but once people get the seat, it's not as much professional learning and development that happens with being in the seat and keeping it and being an effective leader overall. And so here in Haywood County, we already valued building their capacity because we were having the monthly sessions, but we heard them when they said they wanted that in-depth growth and development to help build their capacities now that they're in the seat. And so we did our research and we actually sought out Pivot, and you all came in and you really provided that support last year, and we're continuing it this year. And with that intensive support with our principals, and then that yearly touch with our full admin team and principals with you all, it really is helping to grow the leadership capacities of not only the principal, but our school admin teams as a whole.
That's great. Thank you. Dr. Murphy, one thing you said that stood out to me that I'd love you to follow up on a little bit was this idea of ownership and how, effective principals really need ownership of things. I'm wondering if you could speak to that. I think sometimes there is a tension in the work because, when it comes to alignment and wanting to ensure like equity and wanting there to be a clear strategy from a district perspective. Sometimes I think from a school perspective, feels like almost there is a lack of ownership or a lack of autonomy, when in reality, a principal's job is to like understand that strategy and then apply that strategy in a way that works in their school with their team and serving their students, right? And it takes a level of ownership to do that. So I'm wondering if you can speak to just the importance of that idea of ownership and also maybe some of what makes that hard in work with principals. And Dr. Jackson, I'm going to come to you for the same kind of perspective on that same idea of ownership too. So, Dr.
Yeah,
Murphy, will you start us off there?
yeah, absolutely. When we think about ownership for our principals, because, having been principals, all of us, and thinking about all the things that are on our plates as principals, particularly with turnaround work, a lot of things are shifted down to the principal out of I would say, compliance level, right? And even though as a principal, I believed in the initiatives that were coming down, right, and across our district into my school. But how did I own that work? And I didn't necessarily own that work if it wasn't clear to me. So it's about clarity and providing clarity for our principals, making sure we get those action steps with them, provide the one-on-one coaching process with them. I know that you guys provide systematic coaching with our principals as well, but we have touch points, myself and my supervisor within our region, where we make sure that we have strategic questions and one-on-one coaching process to make sure that they're supported with that ownership. And it's also, and think about what you said about autonomy, right? Every school looks different, even though all of our schools are in the city center. Both my high schools look totally different, completely different demographics, all the things, right? And so how do we own that district level plan? How do we own that school improvement plan? What does it look like? And I think that our principals are owning it better when they feel comfortable with that and have that confidence. And thinking about what our students own the work and student ownership when they feel confident about it, right? And how do you make that confident? Well, success criteria, right? So in thinking about that whole mindset and that paradigm, how do we shift that to our principals, and how do we create success criteria for our principals as well? And that's one of the things we work closely with you guys with helping develop principal success plans that has clear metrics of ownership that are differentiated for our schools.
Yeah, yeah. How about in Haywood County, Dr. Jackson? How does this idea of ownership for principals show up?
In Haywood County, we really work to start at the top, right, with our district team and then trickle down. So we not only meet with the principals, we meet with the assistant principals, we meet with the PLC coaches. They all get the same message and we work together to craft that message. But then from there, to your point, and similar to what Dr. Murphy said, it does become the responsibility of the principal to own the work. It's not always the district said, It is, I believe in this because I was involved in decision making. I was clearly communicated with. I understand what those expectations are. And I also know that there is support that will be provided with helping me to meet these expectations. And so with our principals, they are the leaders of their building. And all of us are wraparound supports to help them to meet the needs of the students that are inside of their buildings. In addition, just with the ownership across the board, Haywood County is unique in each grade level each school only has 2 grade levels. And then our high school has all 4. So all of our kids are all of our kids. And the things that you do with them in the 3rd and 4th grade building, that trickles down to 5th and 6th, 7th and 8th in the high school. And all of the things that happened before they got to your building also work together to support. So that really helps our principals as well to own the work and to own the supports that they are providing, because they know that all of our students are all of our students, and ultimately we're working to help them to improve their outcomes.
Yeah, thank you both for that follow up there. I think that idea of ownership is just really important and connects to capacity building because, as I think both of you alluded to this idea that people feel a sense of ownership when they know that they have the capacity to really take something and do that work well, and that they are, their purpose is clear. And so I think the more capacity that people have, the more ownership they can feel over something. All right. Let's talk about this question. And this is clearly an interesting time to be talking about funding, anything related to funding and education. So recognizing, these questions were written a little while ago, and I think us and everyone on this call is probably on a roller coaster around funding right now. That said, we would love to just hear from both of you around how historically you've navigated the federal and state grants process to support leadership capacity building work. And Dr. Jackson, why don't you take this one first?
Okay, so here in Haywood County, we do receive federal funds as well as the state grants, and we have 3 CSI schools, and so we get additional funding with our CSI schools to provide supports at the school level. With our federal funding, I'll start there historically because we are in budget season currently with a Plan A and a Plan B, depending on what happens with those federal funds. We do in Haywood County, because we're a smaller district, we do school-wide pool for our federal funds. And that's where we take all 5 of the title funds and pull them into one pool, and we provide supports that way. And so traditionally, the funds that we use in Haywood County to provide our support and leadership capacity to our principals is Title II. But because we do school-wide pool, all of those funds are pooled together, and we're able to allocate the resources to match the needs of our schools and of our leaders. With our state money, especially with our CSI money, we are also in a bit more liberal, and we do know that that money is coming. We are able to provide additional supports as well, because we do put leadership coaching right there when we submit our tag, when we submit our SSIG funding. We prioritize not only teacher and student needs, but we always include line items that support building leader capacity, because we want our leaders to stay. We want them to grow, and having that retention and growing and developing and pouring into our leaders, not only just from a resources perspective, but also funding and allocations that are specific to their growth. It helps them to say, I want to stay in Haywood County and I want to continue to grow and develop.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Dr. Murphy, how about you?
Yeah, I'll take this one from, like you said, understanding the unique situation we're in. I'll just talk historically what we've done. We've kind of taken it from a level of, and since I've been in this role for 3 years, my schools, the CSI schools are within my region, except for one. And so, navigating the federal and state grants process, for leadership capacity building, it involves aligning, to me, leadership development initiatives with clearly defined strategic outcomes, such as, student achievement, lowering chronic absenteeism, and overall teacher effectiveness. Those are the three big buckets that we kind of make sure we align those funds with within our region. And also, we support our instructional leaders in Region 5 with intentionally aligning their principal success plans that I spoke of earlier with instructional frameworks that we provided here in the district, and also the state goals, and thinking about the turnaround plan, the turnaround grant, strategic plans that we have in Region 5, the instructional model coaching tool that we have specific to our CSI designated schools and ATSI and TSI as well, and also the instructional practice guides, IPGs, and the team rubric. So making sure that we're aligning all those pieces together to support the work. We want to make sure that we provide coherence and facilitate compliance with the grant requirements also. I'll also say in Region 5, we also strategically differentiate our support, and we have a regional instructional leadership team in our region, a band of 20 district level support personnel on my team, and we kind of strategically deploy, differentiate our support by categorizing the needs of our schools based on their designation, whether it be CSI, ATSI, TSI designation, or our schools that aren't designated but have specified needs. For example, several of our schools have an elevated and increasing population of ELL, ESL students as well. So we're kind of differentiating our support there as well. So, and also we're leveraging our structures and the structures of support with you guys through Pivot to make sure we have that targeted evidence-based investments through these funds to make sure we have that leadership capacity that strongly aligns with our grant expectations and the compliance within those grants.
Thank you both so much. Just for context, in case anyone on the call has any questions about, we've heard a lot about CSI schools. So CSI are schools that are comprehensive support and improvement, which is a federal improvement designation that all states are required to have for schools that are performing in the bottom 5%. And our current federal education policy, of course, again, recognizing we're in this time where sort of anything that has existed historically, we're all trying to feel our way through right now what that means for the present and the future. But as it currently exists, our federal education policy requires that states provide additional supports for schools that are in the bottom 5%, as well as schools that have student groups that are performing in the bottom 5%. And so there are additional funding streams that come through states to support those or to pay for those supports. The idea being that our schools who need the most improvement to ensure that kids are really learning, that we are investing in those schools so that they can make that improvement possible. And leadership capacity building or leadership professional development is one of the allowable research evidence-based strategies. And so when you hear Dr. Murphy and Dr. Jackson talking about their school turnaround or their district turnaround plans, the school turnaround plans, they are required to choose certain strategies for how they're going to make those improvements for student learning. And one of the strategies that they've identified is leadership professional development. And so because of that, then they are able to invest some of that state and federal funding that supports improvement work specifically in this. And so I think while every state has a different unique policy around that, those big ideas generally exist. All right, our next question, and Dr. Murphy, will go to you first on this one. What impact have you seen through your investment in leadership capacity building?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I've seen growth in 3 areas or buckets that I kind of categorize and we'll walk through. The first one I have here that I want to talk about is strengthening systems and structures. That's what we've seen with our support through Pivot, through you guys, as well as our regional instructional leadership team, where school leaders establish their clear visions, improve the functionality of their systems, such as their PLCs, their data management. You guys have helped us really with the calendaring with our principals, making sure that they're managing their time allocation as well, and also their leadership team overall effectiveness. I believe that by focusing on strengthening these systems and structures in our schools through collaboration with you guys, we better support our instructional leaders with making sure that we have coherence and a collaborative approach to instructional leadership. The second one I categorize as alignment and clarity. I'm all about that clarity piece of it, where leadership decisions and actions become closely aligned to their school improvement plans. improving monitoring, accountability, and also achievement of the goals within their school improvement plan. Through a focus on alignment and clarity, our principals are able to really increase the ownership of the instructional priorities, which improves their visibility in their schools. Also, their modeling of expectations, whether it be for the assistant principals, instructional coaches, and teachers, so forth, and also reinforces best practices aligned to the district-wide instructional goals. So that second one was alignment and clarity. And third one I put down here was accelerated growth and trust. We believe that precise, targeted coaching actions, drive quicker leadership development and trust building. There's a phrase I use all the time that growth builds trust and trust builds growth. That captures how effective capacity building fosters both personal development for our instructional leadership principals, also that relational trust among school leaders and their staff as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Dr. Murphy. How about you, Dr. Jackson?
In Haywood County, the support and the impact that we've seen, one, of course, is we've seen improvements in our student data and outcomes from some of the consistency and accountability that's happened from building leader capacity. And so we were very clear with our academic vision, the supports that we'll be providing, and what that looked like monthly. So we calendared it out monthly. We provided the professional learning, but then we gave schools the opportunity to have that safe practice to where they were implementing it in the ways that made sense for their buildings. And after that, we do our walkthroughs, we provide additional supports to meet the needs of the schools where they are and bring them up like in the areas that they're working on. After that academic alignment, we also moved into culture. Here in Haywood County, we had to take the time to do a reset with our culture. One, where the principals, being the leaders of the building, held the teachers accountable and clearly exemplified the expectations through modeling, through scenarios in many different ways. One of the analogies that they learned in one of the pivot sessions was about the salt shaker. And if you walk by the salt shaker and the salt shaker is misplaced, you know where it's supposed to be. Do you continue walking or do you stop and move the salt shaker back to where it goes? And so we spent a lot of time with addressing the things that don't meet the expectation, coming up with ways to support it and to provide it. And that impact, number one, with our teacher retention rates are on the rise. Our teachers are staying, and most importantly, our principals are staying. And so we know to continue this work and to close gaps, we have to retain our talent. And through building leadership capacity and some of our other strategies, we've had that impact here in Haywood County Schools.
That's great. Thank you both so much. Okay, our last big question, and this is a big one because this is about prioritization, right? In our post-COVID time, strategies like HQIM implementation and tutoring have seen large investments, both of which are incredibly important and impactful strategies. So knowing this, why should leadership capacity building also be an area of focus? When there are so many things to choose from, why choose investing in the capacity building of your leaders? And Dr. Jackson, let's hear from you first on this one.
In Haywood County, in our opinion, we want to sustain the work that we're doing. And in order to sustain the work, we have to invest in and build up the people that are leading and doing the work. And so even with making the investments in our high quality instructional materials and tutoring and other things to help with closing learning gaps that students have, we also have to continue to support and invest in our leaders because they are leading the work. They're driving the work. They are leading these programs. And also, it's important to invest in them so that we can remain consistent with the growth and the supports that we're providing.
Thank you. Dr. Murphy, how about you?
Sorry, I was already unmuted. I apologize there. But I really ditto everything that was just said, talking about that sustainability. While, high quality instructional materials, HQIM, and tutoring, they're, critical direct services that drive student success, right? We believe that leadership capacity building ensures that these resources are implemented effectively and sustainably, like we spoke to earlier, and also effective instructional leaders they're effective in their work are needed to really systematically integrate the HQIM and know how to integrate it, and also the tutoring and other interventions into like cohesive instructional practices that benefit all of our students, right? And I also believe that effective coaching and leadership development transforms instructional practices from these isolated interventions into more integrated, sustainable school improvement strategies. I also believe that leadership capacity building complements, the direct instructional supports that we talk about by providing, the integrity, coherence, and also strategic use of these investments when we think about the HQIM and tutoring initiatives also. So strong leadership guarantees investments are not just temporary interventions, but are strategically embedded in what we do as part of the school culture. The results would be sustained improvements. Also, student achievement will be increasing as we see a result of sustainability, while at the same time addressing the long-term impacts of, COVID-19 as well. So, long story short, by investing in both, student supports and leadership capacity of our principals, our schools can almost position themselves to accelerate student learning recovery, close the achievement gaps, and also foster that long-term sustainable and high-quality teaching and learning in their schools.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you both. And I love this theme of sustainability. One thing that has been a clear theme for me in this work is the idea that when we drive improvements around a principal, like even with the best of intentions, because the principal job is really complex and we don't want to put extra work on their plate, but we drive improvements around a principal instead of through a principal, doesn't really work. It does not sustain itself, right? And think about when we think about implementation at the school level, there's got to be back to this idea of ownership. There's got to be a school owner that is thinking about the strategy and implementation for that specific school system, that school, right? So if any of the improvements are going to be sustained over time, our leaders have to have the capacity to own it and to implement it at a high level and consistently. So this idea that these things need to be sort of interconnected, intertwined, like invested in together, I think is really important to actually sustain the work over time. And we've heard a lot from Dr. Jackson and Dr. Murphy about schools that are working to make significant improvements, right? Schools that have the CSI designation. And often when a school is designated as CSI, there is this like initial kind of turnaround phase where a year or two you're trying to make some pretty significant improvements, but then after that you're really trying to sustain, because that requires this kind of pace and urgency that it's hard to keep up over time, and so you have to think about sustainable strategies, and leaders in the building having the skill to implement effectively is just so crucial in sustaining any improvements that are made for schools. All right, so with that, I want to talk through two considerations. If you are on this call and thinking about, okay, I want to learn more about investing in leadership capacity building. How should I be thinking about this decision? I want to share a couple of thoughts there, and then we'll open it up for questions from the group. So the first thing that I want to share is just this way of thinking about leader needs and school needs, right? So if you're thinking about leadership capacity building work, whether you're talking about your own internal like district or CMO specific systems, or you're talking about potentially partnering with someone external to your organization, I think really analyzing supports from both of these perspectives and making sure that the supports are getting at both is really important, right? Because some supports just focus on leader needs and some supports just focus on school needs. But the most effective support is going to analyze the leader needs, right? Their strengths, their opportunities, their skill sets, their mindsets, their previous experiences. And they're going to take that in context with the school that they are leading, the school's strengths and opportunities of the team, the effectiveness of the existing systems that enable instruction, student culture, attendance, and operations, the school's culture, team culture, and the family and community role in that school. So we just have to make sure we think about leaders in the context of their environment when we're thinking about building their capacity, and not just who the leaders are outside of what the environment needs from them. And I think just to go one level deeper here, this idea that a leader may have a relative strength in something, and their environment might demand that that thing still grow, like that thing that they have a relative strength in might need to be even more effective than it currently is to drive a result in their current environment. So I think just that situational piece is really important as you're considering systems for leadership capacity building. The other thing to consider is just what research tells us about what effective programming looks like. And so what we know to be true is that there are three components that should exist together to really move leader practice. The first one is leader community, that leaders are coming together, that they are sharing space, safe space to be the learner with people who are doing similar work to what they are doing. So often leaders in buildings carry so much pressure and so much weight, and it's not safe for them not to know things or to be the learner, to be the vulnerable one, right? So it's important that they have a safe community where there are other leaders doing work that's similar to them, where they are safe to be a learner. The second is that they are learning through applied learning experiences, right? That they are applying their new knowledge to their context, their data, their team structures in their schools. In a group learning setting, this can look like things like case studies and role plays and various practice or feedback scenarios where people get to redo things. In real time, this can look like real time coaching and then sort of getting feedback and applying something in real time. And the last one is the individualized coaching and implementation support, that they have someone who is in person with them, who knows their school, who knows what student learning currently looks like in their school and where they know it's capable of going and where it needs to get, and the strategies that have been identified to get it there, and that they're able to support that leader in real time through coaching and feedback. And, that can look like co-working on something. It can look like direct coaching. It can look like more facilitative coaching. It can look a lot of different ways. But the idea that leaders are getting support at implementing and real-time feedback while they're doing that is crucial for actually changing skill set and changing practice and behavior. All right, with that, we are going to open it up for questions. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and use the Q&A feature and drop them in there. And just give us a second as we navigate getting the questions up. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just told you that you were using the Q&A feature, and I was wrong about that. We are using the chat feature, so I apologize. Okay, so we have a question here. I'm going to read this out loud. Dr. Jackson, I loved your analogy about the misplaced salt shaker. It's such a relatable concept from my experience as an educator in various leadership roles. My question is, what key strategies are principals in Haywood County using to proactively identify and position the salt shaker before small issues escalate into potentially major obstacles? What a great question and such a prevalent one. Dr. Jackson, what are
Yes.
your thoughts on this?
Yes, so the salt shaker was actually part of one of our sessions with Pivot, and they gave us all salt shakers. I still have mine on my desk in the spot where it's supposed to be. But it's really around like setting the expectation. And to your point with the small issues. So if you have your faculty meeting or you're having your professional learning session, and you say as the principal, between each transition, teachers should be in the hallways or at their certain posts from bell to bell, right? So simple expectation, you've modeled the expectation, you've outlined where everyone should be when the bell rings for dismissal and when the bell rings for the students to be in class. And it could be as something as simple as you are standing outside of your door where you can still see in your classroom, but you're in the hallway. Well, when the transition bell rings, what's the first thing you should do as a principal? Step out in the hallway, walk around, see if the people are in their spots doing what they need to do to cut down on some of the issues that may happen during transition. So, really, with those strategies, it's modeling clear expectations, not making it too big, being digestible, modeling it, giving safe practice, and then inspecting it. And then if you inspect it and something is not happening, providing those supports in order to redirect and help the teachers, students, whoever it is that they're working with to meet the expectation. Because if you do this with small issues, you can catch things. At one of our schools, it there were fights. And of course, we offer the opportunity to have DHA hearings. And if we're looking at the video of what happened, what's the number one thing we're looking for? Where were the teachers in the hallway where they were supposed to be? And majority of the time they were not. And in incidents where they were, it was de-escalated quickly and didn't build on. So I know that that was a simple, expectation, but the strategy is still the same. Set the expectation, model it, give it time for safe practice, inspect it, and then provide those additional supports and address it when expectations aren't being met.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. The next question is, where do you see a principal's role in recruiting and retaining talent in their building? Dr. Murphy, you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Like with us, what we've done is we've really supported our principals over the past 2 years of what we're calling the stay conversations. And we've really leveraged, we've created a playbook for them with guiding questions and started that sooner than later. Right. And really leveraging and having those conversations with people that you want to stay in your building and also supporting them with those pieces. And also, like Dr. Jackson mentioned, the modeling that and role playing with those conversations. So those are things that we've been really using as a high leverage strategy within our region, making sure because our region has, it's all urban. So we see a lot of turnover, a lot of job embedded. But since we've had those state conversations, we've had a high retention rate with that piece of it, and also having clear metrics that we have in our strategic plan that has guided that and as well. So the state conversations, and also when we create our strategic plan, we had what does the portrait of a Region 5 educator look like? For example, with that piece of it, cultural competency, those are some of the things that are elevated out in there. Also, perseverance, also growth mindset. So those are the things that we use as high leverage moves, and also the state conversation questions are driven by the Region 5 portrait of an educator as well. So those are the two levers that we pull here.
That's great. I'll add this idea that I think team culture is one of the most important indicators, like one of the most important work streams that a principal has. Creating a space where teachers want to be, see themselves growing, find success is like some of the most important work that a principal does, and that directly connects to teacher retention for sure. I think this question asks about both recruitment and retention, and I think especially given our current labor market, like the best recruitment is retaining and growing your people. Keeping our people and ensuring they are growing is definitely the best recruitment. I think on the recruitment side, obviously, like every system is different and has different either school level or system level expectations for recruiting. I do think that, principals should have a clear process through which they make a decision about whether or not a teacher is going to join their team that involves actually seeing them teach when possible, and a clear interview guide that has questions with criteria for success for those questions. Like, what does a strong answer to those questions sound like that aligns to the values that are important in your school? And so I think that's when we think about the recruitment piece, principals making good choices about who they're bringing onto the team, I think is a really big lever they can pull there. Dr. Murphy mentioned stay conversations, which are crucial in this space. And the idea that people are growing is really important, which directly connects to the coaching structures, and all of the academic enabling systems, right? Like whether it's PLCs, whether it's walkthroughs, whether it's one-on-one coaching, all of those are building teacher capacity, but they when executed well, they help people feel seen, heard, respected, and they help people feel successful. When executed poorly, they make people feel like they're being told what to do and just have to do what they're being told what to do. So doing those things well, executing the academic enabling systems well, impacts team culture, which impacts teacher retention. So this is all really directly connected in terms of what the principal's role in that is. Let's go to this next question, and Dr. Jackson, we'll hear from you first, and then we'll also hear from Dr. Murphy on this one. So do either of you have a story of a principal that sticks out that went from underperforming to high performing as a result of focused investment in their learning and development? What sticks out to you about what drove their growth? Thank you. Also, feel free to share kind of as anonymously as possible. Dr.
Okay,
Jackson,
so I'll go first. So one of our schools here, last school year was our first year. It was restructured from the superintendent down within our schools as well. And so one particular school, it was a new principal. So it was their first year in the school. The school was a level 1 school, and we had to provide additional supports because it was a CSI school as well. And so throughout all of last year, number one thing I believe that helped to move from underperforming to high performing in 1 year, because in 1 year that particular school went from a level 1 to a level 5, was the investment that we made in the leader. And not only the leader, but the leadership team as a whole as well. We provided those wraparound supports. They also had a coach. It was the outside vendor coach that came in once to twice a week in person to help to drive that work in the building as well. That coach would come to our district sessions. They knew what we were working on as a district and really worked with the principal to bring those initiatives to life inside of their buildings to provide that support. And so within 1 year and a first year principal, one of our schools went from level 1 to level 5. And a huge reason for that was the investment that we made in building leader capacity.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story. Dr. Murphy, how about you?
Yeah, one principal that we currently have comes to mind. A principal had been at the school for, I think, 4 or 5 years before we moved to this regional structure 3 years ago. And I would categorize it as the principal was in a cycle of chaos, right? Coming out of COVID, all the things, and we think about too, in COVID, our principals were told what to do. These are the procedures and the processes, right? And so coming out of that principal was in a cycle of chaos on looking for us to tell them what to do, what moves to make, right? And so that's where we really leaned on, you guys and myself and my team to really provide clarity around that role and also give her the liberty to really have autonomy to know what she needed to do for her building and her students. And we started with that conversation. Also, we have seen a drastic turnaround in that school and her leadership style because she now has the confidence. It's not a cycle of chaos. It's really strategic now in what she's doing to close the loop on the conversations. All that because of the coach. She's highly coachable now. She doesn't walk around on eggshells because she knows what the clear moves need to be with that through the coaching that you guys have provided, as well as my team with that piece of it. So I would just summarize it by saying, one of the moves we made was to make sure that we built confidence in her by providing clarity with the moves that she needs to make, and also providing coaching in a systematic way with that piece of it. I always equate it to football players. If I'm focusing on throwing the pass, and I have been in a cycle of chaos, I need somebody to walk alongside me and say, "Hey, this is what you're doing wrong. Let's this is your coaching framework. Or we're going to start with one small success first and see that success as a change over the week." And one of the things we talk about is that we want to see that success in the coachable moments. We can see that change the next week. If we can't see it the next week, then it's too big of a goal for you. So how do we make that really clear for you with that? So that was my testimony with that.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it here because we're almost at time. For our audience, I want to share that if you have additional questions that were not answered today, we will follow up. And if you have anything that comes to mind after you log off, feel free to email info@pivotleaders.org and we can reach out with thoughts around those questions. Thank you all so much for being here today. We're really grateful that you chose to spend this time with us, and deep gratitude to Dr. Murphy and Dr. Jackson, who gave of their busy schedules to support all of our learning and critical thinking about this really important work. I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon. Bye, y'all.